Good day, everyone, and welcome to Prokon's Autodesk and Sumo webinar. Today, I'll be discussing the workflow around the Prodesk and Prodesk steel extensions, which have been developed into Autodesk's advanced steel and Revit packages. The purpose of this webinar is to illustrate typical workflows between Revit, advanced steel, and Sumo, so that it could speed up your analysis, design, and detailing processes. I've personally found both of Prokon's extensions to be extremely beneficial when it comes to the optimization of my personal workflow, and I hope by the end of this webinar, you might think the same. Right, so my name is Michael Klomp, and I'll be your main presenter for the day. I obtained my civil engineering degree from the University of Pretoria. I previously worked in the consulting industry, where I gained a bit of practical experience in both the civil and structural engineering environments. Johan, similar to me, also obtained his civil engineering degree from the University of Pretoria. He's a great interest in computers and networks and serves alongside me in the technical support department. And lastly, I would like to introduce Andrew Brooks. Andrew is a senior member of the technical support office and has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to computer-based structural engineering solutions. Right, so before we get started, let's just get some logistics out of the way. Jan and Andrew will be answering the questions via the Q&A function located at the bottom center of your screen. The chat function, it won't be enabled for you to communicate with us, so please make use of that Q&A function, and then we will try and answer as many of your questions as possible during my demonstration. And I'll also open up a Q&A session at the end of the demo part of the webinar, where Johan and Andrew will direct specific questions to me, which you guys should have, and hopefully if we have sufficient time, I can answer some of those questions. Okay, I'm going to now move over to Revit. We'll run through the first typical workflow using our Prodesk extension, and then we'll move on to illustrate typical workflows using the Prodesk steel extension for advanced steel. All right, so as you all are probably familiar with, we have a typical Revit model here. I have done a lot of the work already, so I've converted this from an architectural model and have changed it into a structural model. So this structural model will have structural elements to it. If I turn on my analytical model, or let me just turn on my off my volumetric model, you can now see, we can just cancel this. You can now see the analytical lines of the structural model. So I've typically converted that from an architectural model to a structural model so that I can make use of it in Sumo. All right, so that's great. Yeah, so that's a typical internal workflow that you would need to do yourself. Very important workflow, just to make sure that you do have the right structural components. I've done most of that work for us. Right, so we can go ahead now and select that model, and we can use the Prodesk extension, and we can export that model to Sumo. I've done a lot of the section mappings myself, so I'm going to select the Sumo mapping standard. I've also included a lot of my loading in my analytical model as well, so we expect that loading to be pulled through to Sumo. And if you toggle through various of these tabs, you also have the option to convert a architectural wall into a line load, which is very beneficial. That would then typically use the density of the architectural model and then collapse that accordingly into your analytical model. I don't have any in my model, so we won't see that being pulled through, but there are other options here with regards to loads. I want to export all the combinations and the loads cases. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and then export that. First of all, I'll have to go and just save that model. We can call that Revit export final 10. And then we'll get a box. So we had a successful export. Prodesk doesn't report any errors, and we should expect Sumo to open up. Right, as you can see, a lot of those structural elements have been pulled through from Revit into Sumo. We've got a couple of messages. So Sumo allows you as the user to control certain parameters in your model. So for example, one of the parameters being our pad footings need to have a specific boundary condition. So I'm going to go ahead and just select the pad footing and specify a rotational and translational fixity to those. So I'm going to make that a rigid connection, and I'll select all of those. Right, so our message box, there's another option in the message box here, and it says an object list, it's unconnected. So I'm just going to go ahead now and turn on my analytical model. We can see that the pad footing is not connected at this point, and this might be from your analytical model, the boundary conditions that you specified there, and that might be the reason that we are seeing that. We also have all our load cases that have been pulled through. I'm going to switch those off for now. Just go back here, and we also have an option to now go and define our meshing parameters of our slabs as well as our plain shell. So I'm going to select those plain shells. I'm going to change the meshing parameters to 0.25. So Sumo allows you to be in control of all those parameters. And then I'm going to go ahead now and just have a look and check my model. Checking the model is just a good practice, just to make sure that we have specified everything that we needed to. Right, so we just have to now, we can go and now allocate a self weight to the dead loading, which I'll do. Right, so I'm going to go ahead then, and I'm going to go and solve the model. Once again, I just want to show you the load combinations. I'll go ahead now, let's go and solve that. So we're just running through, as you guys are all aware, we have different analysis types. We can run a linear analysis, a buckling analysis, non-linear, as well as a seismic. I've chosen the linear analysis in this example, just for the ease of convenience. Right, as you're all familiar, you've got the results option in Sumo. I'm not going to spend too much time in that. You can animate the model. You've got the reactions, the beams, and the shells. I want to spend a little bit of time on the design links, and I'm going to go and allocate a design group for this model. And I'm going to choose a rectangular column design group. I can go now to my model and specify where in my model I'd like to allocate the design group. So I can choose the columns, and then I will specify that design group. Let's call that design group 1. I'm going to go to the pad footings as well. We'll go and specify design group 2. So you can see that those groups have been established. I can then go and select the design command, and I can turn off certain load cases or combinations. And then you have the option to specify certain conditions for your design. Right, so this is a very nice link between Sumo and our design files. It's very compatible, and it's very nice to use. All right, you can see here now that all of that loading from Sumo has been exported to the rectangular column design module. I can also now go and change certain parameters of the column. So I'm changing the height and the breadth, and we've got all our materials properties pulled through as well. Just want to look at the design quickly. We can go and list the critical load case, and we can just toggle through all our moments on our rectangular column. Then lastly, we can go to our bending schedule, and we can generate a schedule. You can change certain parameters in this schedule. We do give that option in the design module. Right, I'm going to save the rectangular column design file, and then in Sumo we have the option. So Sumo will give you this prompt. It will say cast in place concrete. So that is recognizing the Revit material. And I'm going to select OK. And then it will go and check the Prokon section database for a certain size section. Right, so you can see in our model now, we have updated that very quickly. We've run that analysis. I'm going to go back to our analysis and run it once again. The reason I'm doing this is because our stiffness matrix has changed, because we have updated the section from a 250 section to a 300 by 300. This is a very nice workflow. Just to quickly change those column sizes, you don't have to manually go and change it. And then I'm going to go back to the design links and go to the base design module. I can select the design. Once again, I'm going to just turn off those load cases. You can specify certain parameters there that you'd like to change. I'm going to select OK. So we've got the column base design module opening up now. You can see once again that all your load cases have been pulled through from Sumo, and then we have the option to optimize our base. The optimize function is basically situated around the concrete cost per cube as well as the reinforcing cost per ton, and you can now run a optimization of that base. So you've got your different load cases, and then we've got a 1.7 by 1.1. Once again, all of the Prokon modules ultimately allows you to be in control of the sizes, and we can now go and have a look at our design, and we can have a look at all our bearing pressure or our pressure results, and we can match that according to the bearing pressure that we've received from our geotech report. Right, and then lastly, we can have a look at our bending schedule. We can generate a schedule. We can say yes, and we have a schedule for the bases. Right, so I'm going to go now and save this file. I'm going to close it. And then once again, that Revit property, concrete property has been mapped. I can select yes, and our pad footings have been updated. All right, so we've done a lot of we've solved a lot of the Sumo model now. We've run the analysis. I've done a design. I'm going to save this file, and I'll close Sumo. And now I'm going to just import that Sumo model into my Revit model. So it was a Revit export file. I've done a lot of the mapping once again, so I'm going to use that mapping standard and I'm going to import it. Right, it'll take a brief moment. It's just checking all the updates on sections and so forth. And then we get a message. So we've got an error message that's come up. So maybe in future I can choose maybe a better material properties with my Revit model instead of the ones that were offered. This isn't critical. It will still map it accordingly, and it's not to worry about too much. And then we've got a couple of mark values that appear. This is just saying that a lot of the column sizes have changed. And that's just telling Revit is just giving you that information. We are looking in future to try and provide an option where Revit does allow you, if you've made changes in your Sumo model, whether or not you want to apply those changes to your Revit model. Yeah, it's automatically been changed now. You can see we've got that 300 by 300 column that's been pulled through from Sumo, from our design. Right, so typically that's a very nice workflow, very convenient, and it's going to save you a lot of time if you learn how to master it. Okay, next up, I'm sure that you guys are aware, but we have been talking about going into the ProBar 3D environment, and I'm just going to quickly illustrate to you guys where we are with that with the Prodesk extension. So if I select the base and we go to the reinforcing, I have an option now to go and link my base design file. So I've got that design file that I've loaded. We can then load the reinforcement of that. Once again, I've got mark values that have appeared, and the reason that these have appeared is that we have rebar that is outside the original element. So Revit is just warning you that you have rebar entities that are sticking out, and that fundamentally would be your starter bars from your pad footing into your column. Right, so I'm going to just accept that. I'm going to just say done. And then we can just filter out. I'm going to filter out the structural foundation as well as the analytical lines. Click OK. And we can turn the 3D view on. Right, and then you can see that you have that reinforcing being appeared in the 3D environment. A very nice feature that we are working on and improving on regularly. Right, next I'm also going to do something for the columns. So I'm going to choose a design file. So let's go to the reinforcing column. I'm going to just browse to that file, column 3D rebar. Let's load that reinforcing. You've got that mark value appearing again, and the reason being is that you've got those starter bars at the end of, or at the top of the column, being outside the concrete element, and that's why it's giving us a mark value. I'm going to click OK, say done. I'm just going to filter that out. First, I just want to turn off my analytical model. That is still on, and the reason it's on is that I've defined all my loading. Sorry about that. All right, so we can now go and filter that. I'm just going to have the reinforcing present, and I'm going to just turn the graphics on for that model. Right, so we've got that reinforcing there. You can see your stirrups coming through as well as that main reinforcing, and that's all based on the design that I carried through. And yeah, so I'm sure you guys are all wondering, it's very easy to go and do this model. I've practiced it, I've defined my analytical lines. So for that reason, I'm going to close this model, and I'm going to go and open up a completely new file, and the file that I'm going to choose is a sample file. The sample file is a file that you guys could all go and practice to see how Prodesk works. I haven't made any adjustments to this. You can quickly access it, and yeah, you can go and practice this at home. So once again, I'm going to select this model, use the Prokon Prodesk extension and Sumo export. I've done a lot of the mapping, and let's do the sample export. Just save the Revit file. Can save that, and we might have to do a little bit of the mapping. Right, and we get some error messages appearing. This might just be the case that there's no families, or that my section mapping isn't 100% correct, but this doesn't seem to be a problem. Most of our structural elements will be pulled through to Sumo. So I'm going to close this. Sumo will pop up, and we should have our model appear. All right, so as you can see, once again, I've made no adjustments to the analytical model. I strictly just pulled that through from Revit, and it just illustrates the power of the Prodesk extension in Revit. We can also toggle through some of these messages that have appeared. You've got a pad footing criteria. One thing in Revit to Sumo. Sumo doesn't have a power foundation option yet, but you can go and insert some point supports and define the fixity of that. And then also, if you do have a pad footing, you can go and specify the translational and rotational fixity. But you guys are all familiar with Sumo, and you're familiar with the prompts that it provides you with. So this could take you if you're familiar with Sumo, it could take you 5 minutes to toggle through all the messages that have appeared, where you need to just specify certain boundary conditions. And if you're not familiar with Sumo, it might take you 20 or 30 minutes. A lot quicker than going to remodel a whole Revit model by yourself. And this is one of the powerful options that this module offers us. Right, so that's Prodesk, which is our advanced, our Revit extension. I'm now going to move over to Advanced Steel. And just a quick background, fundamentally the difference between Prodesk and Prodesk Steel. So Prodesk Steel is the extension for Advanced Steel. The Prodesk is completely functional. It's available for you. So first and foremost, I've made a query, and the reason I've set up the query is just to isolate the beams and columns, and to just get rid of my grid lines. So I'm going to select the model. I'm going to once again do the Sumo that's the import, the Sumo export. I'm going to choose a different mapping standard in this time, and we can export. I'm going to just rename that file. Let's call that Advanced Steel Final. Sorry about the caps. And we might have to quickly map that. It appears that it didn't map 100%. So we can, this is typically an H section to 254 by 254 by 73. Just select that. So that's typically how the mapping would work. You would have to map materials from Advanced Steel or Revit and map that according to the Prokon database. Right, it looks like we have no errors that appeared. I'm going to close that, and we will have Sumo open up. All right, I'm just going to go ahead now and add some point support, just so we can have some stability to our model. And I'll push enter, and we can go and add a load case. So you guys are all familiar with this. Let's call that dead. The caps logs is not what I want it to be. There we go. I can also go and add the UDL load. I can define the magnitude. And hopefully we can then add this to the model. Right, we can just drag it and select it. And I can now go ahead and let me just add the self weight, and I can just run a linear analysis or whatever analysis type we want to. We can toggle through the results. We can animate our structure. We can look at all the results. And then we have the design links as well, where we can send that to combined stress to go and actually specify the final dimensions of our model. I'm going to go and change some of my section sizes. So I'm going to add a section, and the reason I'm doing this is to try and export the updated sections. So I'm going to resave the Sumo file and try and import that into Advanced Steel again. This is a beta version, so hopefully this does come through. I'm expecting it to. I'm just going to go and change I've assigned a material to that section, so it's a 305 by 102 by 25 section. Right, I'm just going to select all of those and just filter the beams. Let's just filter those. Let's say the beam sections or the column sections. Section start. Okay, we didn't get a selection there. Let me just try that again. Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to allocate that 305 by 102 by 25. Right, so we've updated those. I'm going to just do the same for these. Can just go and update my sections. Right, so the 305 by 102. So we have that updated Sumo model now. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And I'm going to just go and open up Advanced Steel. So fundamentally, the difference between Prodesk is fully functional. It's working as is, the Prodesk Steel is still in the development stages, but it is working as expected. So you have the option only to import and export features. So I've opened up a completely new drawing, and I'm just going to import the Sumo model. We can't update the old model. Prodesk still isn't yet there. So I'm now going to just import the model. I think it's the one with all the caps logs, and hopefully we got this pulled through. Right, so it's just asking me to map that 305 by 102 section. So I'm just going to have to go to the SA sections. Right, so it's SA, it's a universal beam, and I'm going to look for that section, the 305 by 102 by 25. Right, so looks like we have no error messages coming through, and then great. It did work as expected. I can just go and have a look at those properties now. If I'm correct, it was a 305 by 102 by 25 section. Right, so that's sort of brings us to the end of my workflow discussion. The workflow, in my personal opinion, will save you a lot of time, and the modeling process is very simple using this extension. We use an Exchange file format for the Revit to Sumo links, and it's extremely beneficial. Right, so we'll now release a few poll questions for you guys to respond to. Yeah, we'll release a few poll questions, and then I'll try my best to answer any questions which you've been sent to me via the technical support team. We also have some online training coming up, so keep an eye out on our website as well as our social media platforms for the online training dates. Right, so I'm going to give a moment for everyone to respond to those poll questions while I look at all the questions coming through from our technical support team. Right, so this webinar, as I've discussed, is strictly a workflow webinar. So the idea behind it is to show you how our software can speak to different software such as Revit and Advanced Steel, and how it is basically able to link to our design modules, and it's based around in how you can save time as designers or consultants in your different environments. If there are any specific questions that you have with regards to Prodesk or Prodesk Steel, you're more than welcome to contact us on our support platform that you're all familiar with. That's support@prokon.com. And yeah, so there's another question coming through, and that's with regards to steel connections. So at the moment, Revit is the Prodesk extension has a small option for the connections, but we are sort of in the development phase of the connection side of Prodesk as well as Prodesk Steel. So ultimately we are heading towards an environment where you might have a connection in Advanced Steel where you might want to design and check. Those are primarily for the normal connections and not customized connections, and we are heading towards that direction in the future. Right, so I'm just waiting for our technical support just to submit the last couple of questions through. Right, sorry, we lost you there for a second. I'm still here. If there are any of questions that you would like me to address, you can just send it through. Our technical support team is filtering through those questions. And yeah, so the idea once again is just to inform you about the different options you have in terms of speeding up your workflow. You don't want to spend time in wasting all your time in trying to remodel models when you don't need to. And there is different features that we do provide to speed up that process. Right, so we don't have any more questions coming through. So just a reminder once again, for more tips and tricks on the various Prokon modules that we have, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can type Prokon Software Consultants into our YouTube page and you should find us. Subscribe. We upload videos regularly, almost 3 to 4 a month. And if you're getting stuck with some of our design modules or analysis packages or detailing packages, go and have a look at that, consult it. And also we have our support portal as well as our knowledge base. If you are an existing client, you're more than welcome to send queries through to support@prokon.com. We are here to help you and get you up to speed with things. Right, that brings us to the end of our webinar. I want to really extend my gratitude and to say thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking time out of your day. Keep an eye out for our next event. Goodbye, stay safe, and enjoy the rest of your day.